President Lee Jae-myung has begun his visit to Chile, where he'll hold summit talks aimed at deepening bilateral ties, including efforts to modernize the Korea-Chile Free Trade Agreement. New U.S. Ambassador to South Korea, Michelle Seoul, has arrived in Seoul, pledging to work closely with the Lee Jae-myung administration to strengthen the allies' ironclad partnership. The Federal Reserve is holding interest rates steady once again, extending its pause to a fifth straight meeting, as policymakers remain wary of persistent inflation and an uncertain economic outlook. President Lee Jae-myung has arrived in Santiago for summit talks with Chilean President Jose Antonio Kast, where the two leaders are expected to discuss upgrading their bilateral free trade agreement. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jung-min begins our coverage tonight.
Having wrapped up his state visit to Brazil, President Lee Jae-myung has landed in Chile, the second leg of his three-nation trip to South America. Meeting the Korean community on Wednesday, President Lee highlighted Korea's ties with Chile.
양국 국민이 더 깊은 신뢰와 우정의 마음을 나누는 한-칠레 관계의 새로운 미래를 목격하고 있습니다. 핵심 강물, 청정에너지, 디지털과 인공지능, 과학기술과 문화에 이르기까지 양국 간의 협력의 지평은 점차 더 넓어지고 있습니다.
The next day, he will lay a wreath at the monument for Bernardo O'Higgins, honored as one of the nation's founding fathers. President Lee will go to the presidential palace on Thursday to meet with his Chilean counterpart, Jose Antonio Kast, who took office in March. The leaders will attend an official welcoming ceremony, expanded talks, an exchange of MOUs, a joint press conference, and lunch. Their key focus is modernizing the Korea-Chile Free Trade Agreement, which hasn't been updated since it went into effect in 2004 to reflect new areas, including digital trade and environmental cooperation.
We expect to dramatically increase trade with the South American countries and support our companies making inroads into the regional market.
South Korea also looks to expand cooperation in critical minerals, energy, and food. Chile is one of the major producers of copper and lithium.
We plan to strengthen our strategic partnership related to critical mineral supply chains and deepen discussions on diversifying sources of food and energy imports.
Also on the agenda is cooperation for the UN Ocean Conference set to be co-hosted in 2028 by South Korea and Chile. After concluding the summit, Lee will attend a Korea-Chile business roundtable. The South Korean president's trip to the key economic power in South America takes place as the country looks to expand its diplomatic horizons to the global south. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Santiago.
Washington's top diplomat to Korea landed here in Seoul this afternoon, filling a post that had been vacant for a year and a half. Michelle Park-Steele, a politician turned ambassador, gave a press statement upon her arrival. Our Oh Soo-young has this report.
The new U.S. ambassador to Korea, Michelle Steele, arrived in Seoul on Thursday as Washington's first pick for the role in the second Trump administration. Delivering a statement at Incheon International Airport, Steele first reaffirmed the strength of the alliance.
The United States and the Republic of Korea have stood together for more than 140 years. Our alliance was forged in war and secured by blood of those who stood shoulder to shoulder to defend freedom.
Born in Seoul after her parents fled North Korea, Steele is the first Korean-American woman and the second female U.S. ambassador to serve in Korea. A two-term Republican congresswoman from California, she has focused on Korea-U.S. issues and strategic competition with China. Before leaving Washington, Steele met Korean ambassador to the U.S. Kang Kyung-hwa. The Korean embassy said on Thursday that they reaffirmed their commitment to strengthening the alliance and expanding cooperations in areas including shipbuilding, nuclear-powered submarines, and advanced technology. Steele also referred to Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Donald Trump agreeing on trade and security priorities outlined in a joint fact sheet last year.
In Gyeongju, President Trump and President Lee opened a new chapter in our alliance. I look forward to working with the Republic of Korea to ensure that our ironclad alliance remains a linchpin of peace and security in the region. Together, we will carry President Trump's vision for this alliance forward, stronger, safer, and more prosperous than ever before.
Under the joint fact sheet, the Allies are working towards progress on nuclear-powered submarines, shipbuilding cooperation, and Korea's access to enrichment and spent fuel reprocessing. Still, we'll also oversee Korea's $350 billion US investment commitment amid tensions over tariffs and market access disputes. She'll also likely focus on alliance modernization, defense spending, wartime operational control, and the regional role of US Forces Korea. On North Korea still has previously taken firm positions on the regime's weapons programs and human rights abuses. While some progressive groups in the South have voiced concern over her hawkish views on Pyongyang and Beijing, Steele is regarded as having direct access to Trump, raising expectations she could serve as a bridge between Seoul and the White House.
Steele's arrival ends an 18-month vacancy in the post after former Ambassador Philip Goldberg's departure in January last year. The new ambassador is expected to submit a copy of her credentials and meet with Foreign Minister Cho Hyun as early as next week before formally presenting them to President Lee Jae-myung. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has left interest rates unchanged for a fifth straight meeting, opting for caution as persistent inflation and economic uncertainty continue to cloud the outlook. Lee Seung-jae has more.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has left interest rates unchanged for a fifth straight meeting, choosing to wait for more clarity on inflation and the broader economic outlook despite renewed pressure from President Donald Trump to cut borrowing costs. At the end of its two-day Federal Open Market Committee meeting, the Fed voted 9-3 to keep its benchmark interest rate at a range of 3.5 to 3.75%. The decision leaves the interest rate gap between South Korea and the United States at as much as 1 percentage point.
Today, as you know, our committee decided to vote by a 9-3 vote to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 3.5% to 3.75%.
Speaking after the meeting, Fed Chair Kevin Warsh said the central bank remains firmly committed to its 2% inflation target, while describing the U.S. economy as showing impressive resilience despite recent shocks, including renewed fighting in the Iran war. Warsh acknowledged that inflation remains above the Fed's target and said policymakers will continue to monitor incoming data carefully.
Broadly, if you said to me standing in front of you, I abide fully by the strategy document, we're going to deliver 2% inflation and not a whisper more. But to achieve that, I'm looking at a broader set of inflation data than PCE.
Asked whether another rate hike would be the best response if inflation stays elevated, he said higher rates could be part of the solution, but stressed that any decision would be based on a broad assessment of economic conditions rather than inflation alone. The decision comes days after President Trump once again urged the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates, arguing that the United States should have the lowest interest rate in the world to support economic growth. When asked about the Fed's decision on Wednesday, Trump praised Warsh as fantastic, brilliant, and smart, while reiterating that he would still like to see lower interest rates in the months ahead. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics has posted its highest ever quarterly operating profit. Now strong earnings are expected to continue as the memory chip shortage shows a little sign of easing. Kim Jun-hong has more.
Samsung Electronics on Thursday said its second quarter operating profit rose more than 1,800% from a year earlier to 89.5 trillion won, or approximately $62.1 billion US. Sales increased 130% to 171.5 trillion won. This marked the third consecutive quarter of record operating profit and revenue. Detailed earnings released Thursday showed semiconductors once again led the company's performance, accounting for 99% of total operating profit. Its chip division, Device Solutions, posted 89.2 trillion won in operating profit, marking another record quarterly performance. Memory chips accounted for nearly all of the division's 127.5 trillion won in sales, A global race to invest in AI data centers kept memory chips in short supply, which drove prices higher.
Samsung is generating strong profits by ramping up HBM production. Since HBM uses multiple layers of DRAM, it leaves less capacity for conventional DRAM and further tightens supply. That drives up conventional memory prices as well, creating a double benefit to earnings.
The tech giant invested a record 16 trillion won in research and development to strengthen its technology leadership. The company expects demand from agentic AI and expanding HBM4E sales to support earnings in the second half. Experts also say much of the HBM supply has already been committed under long-term contracts, which would help sustain earnings in the second half. Yet the mobile and home appliance business posted its first-ever operating loss. The device experience division lost 800 billion won as higher memory prices pushed up production costs. Samsung also announced plans to begin construction of its second chip manufacturing facility in Taylor, Texas later this year, with the aim to start mass production in 2030. The company added that it has secured contracts with all 5 major global data center customers and finalized negotiations on additional long-term supply agreements. Kim Jun-ho, Arirang News.
The earnings calendar reached its peak this week, with hyperscalers Meta and Microsoft reporting their quarterly results on Wednesday local time. The tech giants delivered sharply different messages to investors, one showing how its strong performance could support the company's heavy infrastructure investments, while the other showing the burden it causes. For more, we turn to our Kim Bo-kyung here in the studio. Welcome back, Bo-kyung.
Thank you for having me, Dani.
So, Bo-kyung, let's start with how Meta and Microsoft did for the second quarter.
Right, so both of the companies beat the market's revenue expectations. First of all, Microsoft reported a revenue of around $90 billion, which is around 18% increase on year, surpassing market expectations of $87 billion. Net income rose 31% on year to $35.77 billion, while adjusted earnings per share, or EPS, came in at $4.74, beating the market forecast. Meta, meanwhile, posted revenue of $60.80 billion, which slightly beat analysts' expectations of $60.22 billion. This marks 27% revenue growth year over year.
So they both reported quarterly revenue that beats market expectations, like you said, but the market reactions were quite different. What led to this difference, Bo-kyung?
Right. So although both of the companies showed quite strong performance in terms of revenue, what mattered the most was the returns of AI investments and profitability. In terms of Microsoft, due to ballooning investment in AI infrastructure, free cash flow fell 23% on year to $19.64 billion. But it exceeded Wall Street's estimate of a little more than $13 billion, showing that the company's AI investments were indeed translating into profits. This was mainly driven by its cloud business, Azure, surpassing $100 billion in annual revenue for the first time, and the company's AI productivity tool, Microsoft 365 Copilot, which had more than 30 million subscribers. Meanwhile, in terms of Meta, revenue narrowly exceeded analyst forecasts, but both operating and net income fell after spending on AI infrastructure jumped more than 55% from a year earlier. Free cash flow plunged more than 90% on year to $780 million as capital expenditures surged.
Meta platforms faced pressure from below consensus revenue guidance and slower ad impression growth, while Microsoft rallied on stronger forward guidance, rapid growth in paid 365 Copilot users, and lower capital spending planned. These differences made two stock shares diverge.
So what investors are seeing right now is not just revenue, but whether massive spending is translating into meaningful financial returns and how fast their cash flow is cratering. Another expert says big tech companies are going through a transitional phase as they are engaging in an increasingly expensive race to build next-generation computing capacity, and that the market would have to continue seeing how this could lead to profitability.
AI-related earnings have yet to show clear results, and cash flow is unlikely to improve significantly through next year. The key focus will be whether revenue and operating profits can grow meaningfully.
Well, Bo-kyung, ultimately, what investors here in Korea are most interested in is how this will impact the shares of major Korean chip makers like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. What's experts' view on this?
So major tech companies' continued AI spending is indeed a plus for South Korean chip makers, like you said, SK Hynix and Samsung Electronics. Meta raised the lower end of its CapEx guidance, while Microsoft's second quarter CapEx jumped more than 70% from a year earlier. Now, in the near term, that should support semiconductor demand. The bigger question is how long this investment cycle can last.
Rising capital spending is a positive for Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, but big tech's continued AI investment is starting to resemble a high-stakes race. If some players are forced to scale back or drop out, it could raise concerns about the semiconductor market and weigh on the industry.
Alrighty, Bo-kyung, thank you for the wrap-up today.
Thank you.
The National Assembly's vote on a key prosecution reform bill has been thrown into uncertainty as the opposition launches a filibuster. Our correspondent An Sung-jin reports.
The ruling Democratic Party was set to push through a major judicial reform bill at a plenary session on Thursday.
This legislation is designed to not only effectively respond to crime, but also to enhance the protection of people's rights and expand the procedural rights of crime victims.
However, the main opposition People Power Party launched a filibuster, arguing that there should be a bipartisan agreement on solutions to safeguard victims and prevent investigative gaps.
The Democratic Party has increasingly pushed bills with unilateral votes since securing a majority. If this legislation is enacted, we believe it will have devastating consequences for the country and the people.
The proposed bill is to amend the Criminal Procedure Act by stripping prosecutors of their authority to conduct supplementary investigations. Instead, the police would be required to carry out additional investigations requested by prosecutors within 1 month, and victims would gain stronger rights to challenge police decisions, a measure aimed at softening the impact of removing prosecutors' investigative powers. Unlike this contentious bill, lawmakers passed a special counsel bill to investigate the recent ballot paper shortage during local elections through bipartisan agreement. Leadership from the two main political parties reached a final agreement this morning on the composition of the special counsel team, as well as the investigation's key areas of focus and jurisdiction. The plenary session was also to introduce a separate bill that would shorten the parliamentary fast-track review process for legislation from a maximum of 330 days to just 90. Once Thursday's filibuster ends, DP lawmakers are likely to attempt a vote on this bill, which the PPP says it will filibuster the parliamentary fast-track review bill, setting the stage for another political showdown. Under parliamentary rules, a filibuster can be ended after 24 hours with the support of 3/5 of lawmakers. With the backing of smaller allied parties, the ruling party is expected to have enough votes to cut short the debate and pass the bill. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Hopes for easing tensions between Washington and Tehran are fading as the U.S. steps up strikes on Iranian targets, prompting the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to vow retaliation. Park Gun-woo has the latest.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps vowed Thursday to retaliate and hit U.S. facilities following Washington's renewed airstrikes. In a statement cited by Reuters, the IRGC said the aggressors would be punished and warned that attacks on U.S. facilities across the Middle East would begin today. This comes hours after the U.S. military launched a new round of strikes against Iran. U.S. Central Command announced that the operation began at 8 p.m. Wednesday Eastern Time, describing it as a powerful response to Iran's attempted attacks on American forces in the Middle East a day earlier. Explosions were heard in several locations across southern Iran. The strikes came after U.S. President Donald Trump vowed to hit Iran very hard, following Tehran's launch of ballistic missiles at American forces stationed in Jordan.
In the meantime, we're going to be hitting them very hard because it's our turn to hit them. They know it's coming.
The IRGC said it had fired several ballistic missiles at a U.S. airbase and a military center in Jordan. The U.S. military described it as an attempted surprise attack, saying all incoming missiles were intercepted. Jordan's military also said it intercepted 5 missiles launched from Iran. Following a brief lull, the resumption of attacks from both sides has derailed diplomatic momentum, casting serious doubt on efforts to revive the ceasefire. Meanwhile, a drone strike hit a U.S.-owned gas storage tanker at Egypt's Mediterranean port of Damietta. Maritime security firms said the attack struck the Energus Winter, sparking a fire that spread to another vessel. It said the flames were brought under control and that no injuries or fatalities were reported. Responsibility for the suspected strike remains unclear. 박건우, Arirang News.
Japanese media outlets Kyodo News and NHK have reported that the death toll from the earthquake that struck Kumamoto Prefecture has, as of Thursday afternoon, risen to 34. Now, 8 people have died at a Nippon paper industries plant in Yatsushiro, while 7 were killed at Aeon Mall Kumamoto, a large shopping complex where part of the building collapsed after an explosion. Now, investigators suspect that a gas leak from LPG lines damaged by the quake may have triggered the blast. More than 48 hours after the quake, Japanese authorities say they're racing to save as many lives as possible within the critical 72-hour window, even as extreme heat strains both rescue workers and survivors. In other news, BTS says it will not submit its music for consideration at next year's Grammy Awards. The decision comes after the Grammys created a new award category labeled Asian music. Park Chae-ryung explains.
BTS seems closer to winning a Grammy Award than ever before, as the group topped the Billboard 200 for 2 consecutive weeks and sold out shows worldwide. But the group has made a sudden announcement that it won't submit any of its music for Grammy consideration. For the first time, BTS has voluntarily stepped out of the race. On Wednesday, all 7 BTS members simultaneously shared the same message on their social media accounts, saying music should be heard and loved for what it is, rather than divided by region or language. They did not explicitly mention the Grammy's newly created Best Asian Pop Music Performance category. Still, their posts have been widely seen as an apparent protest against the Grammy's decision to create an award based on region and language. The Recording Academy that oversees the Grammy Awards recently introduced the Best Asian Pop Music Performance category for next year's ceremony. It covers music, including K-pop, J-pop, and C-pop, that originated in or is widely recognized across Asian markets. Eligible songs must make meaningful use of at least one Asian language. It means tracks performed entirely in English do not qualify for the category. Critics argue that it could push artists already competing in the global pop market into a separate lane labeled Asian music. Unlike categories such as rock, pop, or R&B, Asian refers to a region rather than a music genre, while eligibility also depends on the language used in a song. At the heart of the debate is whether the new award represents greater inclusion or simply separates Asian artists from the Grammy's mainstream categories. Recording Academy CEO Harvey Mason Jr. rejected such claims. He said the goal is to give more artists greater visibility and recognition. The Academy also stressed that artists can be submitted and nominated in both the new category and the Grammy's general fields. Park Chae-ryung, Arirang News.
The heat wave just won't let up. Heat wave warnings and advisories cover most of the country now. The heat will also linger overnight, bringing another round of tropical nights to many areas. The national average number of tropical nights is now the highest on record. Seoul has now gone through 8 in a row, while Jeju Island has seen 23. And tomorrow, the sun will be just as intense. UV levels will range from high to very high. Ozone levels will also be high enough to affect air quality across parts of the central regions, including Seoul and the southern regions. So if you have any respiratory issues, it's best to limit prolonged time outdoors. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 26 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon 25 and Jeju 27 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 34 degrees, Daegu 37 and Gyeongju will soar to 38 degrees. Looking ahead to next week, winds will shift to an easterly flow, sending temperatures even higher in Seoul. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.